Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining for the panel. So we were speaking about putting together a panel that was going to be something different at this conference, something different than hearing VCs talk about what they're looking for or hearing kind of how to lead a company and how to de-risk it. We wanted to talk about something that's kind of a black box for most employees in a company, which is after you have commitment from your first investor, what do you do to make sure that that deal closes and you're going to start a good relationship with these partners? So I have a great panel here. We have a great panel here. I'm Adam Rosenwach. I started as a musician. I was a music producer. Then I ended up with the Caridia team as their bookkeeper. And now we're 12 years later, and I'm Chief Business Officer of Deerfield Catalyst, which is a joint venture between Deerfield Management, the venture fund, and Caridia. So why don't we go down the line with introductions, and we'll kick it off.
Hello, my name is Todd Usen. I'm the president and CEO of Minerva Surgical. Minerva Surgical is a publicly traded women's health company located in California and focusing on uterine health and pelvic health. And I've been 30-year medtech industry veteran, I guess. I cut my teeth at Boston Scientific. I spent about 13 years there. In my last role, I ran the United States in the neurovascular space. Stayed at big companies. From there, I went to Smith & Nephew, and one of the top 4 orthopedic companies located here in Europe. And had the opportunity in my last role there. I was the president of all of orthopedics, leading both trauma, joint, and sports medicine. And then I was recruited to another big company, Olympus, where I was the president of all the medical divisions at Olympus. And we went from 6 divisions to 12. So why am I on a panel that says, what do you do after you get the verbal yes? I then went to the dark side and really enjoyed it. And I went to Startup World. And I was the first CEO at Active Surgical. And Active Surgical had completed the world's first fully autonomous robotic procedure of soft tissue with advanced visualization and AI and software. Took that technology, raised $92 million from concept to now it's commercial, being sold and purchased in hospitals, and partnered with some of the scope and robotic companies in the world. So, and then I came to Minerva Surgical, going a little back to the bigger roots, and still need to talk about some verbal yeses, even in this role. So it's nice to be here.
Excellent. So I'm Claire Masterson. I'm the current CFO of Caresyntax. Although I spent, I'd say, 50% of my career on the other side of the table. So starting off in financial services, working for a very large family office. So I've seen things from the other side. And then from there, moved into more commercial companies. So always in a finance role. So Dulligen's Greer, which was a listed allergy immunotherapy specialist. And then into the world of venture with Caresyntax for the last 4 years, where I've supported them raising about 180 million over the last 3 years. So have felt like I've pretty much spent the entire last 3 years fundraising in some form or other. So feel like I have the bruises to contribute to this conversation.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kyle Faget. I'm the attorney up here with my notepad and pen. I am a partner at Foley and Lardner. I sit in Boston, Massachusetts. I am the co-chair of our National Healthcare and Life Sciences Practice Group, and I co-chair our medical device area focus group there. My practice includes regulatory, counseling, compliance, counseling, and a whole variety of contracting issues, so clinical trial agreements, manufacturing agreements, commercial agreements, kind of you name it. Before joining Foley about 7 years ago, I was in-house attorney at 2 pre-commercial stage startup companies, at Sanofi, also at Boston Scientific. So yeah, I'll be here taking notes.
Great. So we cover everything here. We have startups, VC side, big startups, early stage, and we even have a lawyer, so we're ready to rock. Okay, so first we want to define what it means. What does yes mean, right? Because the title of this panel is what happens after you get that first yes. But as I think we're about to hear, there's a lot of different things that happen before you even get a term sheet from that yes. So why don't we open up to the panel? What do you consider the moment where you actually get a yes that you are about to be funded? or at least like on a very certain track that funding's coming in?
So from my perspective, yes, there's probably a yes from the investor, there's a yes from the CEO, and then there's a real yes. Yes to me is when the term sheet's signed, for the most part, because then diligence happens and things can continue to go on. But in the biggest sense, yes is when the money is in the bank.
Yeah, I was actually going to say exactly that.
Sorry.
So I'm a finance person. So for me, I like to see the cash hit the bank and the real close is the final yes. But, term sheet is obviously incredibly important. It, means that the investor has made that decision to progress. I think it's really, really important that before you get to that term sheet stage, that you've actually had the opportunity to really go through a pretty deep level of diligence already, so that there's no surprises lurking whereby there might be any retrading of terms after that point. But certainly I feel at that point it's almost yours to lose as sort of the company that they're investing into, and really it's how well you can manage that process from that point to get them over that finishing line.
So can you talk about a bit more the different kinds of commitments that you've gotten? Because, okay, so yes, when we know it's going to happen, that's when money's in the bank, definitely. What kind of different situations have you been through, and the rest of the panel, where you've gotten that first soft commitment, and how did you push that over the finish line to get the whole deal put together?
So I think, and I'm more prodding you, we talked a bit yesterday, when you get those soft yeses and how it can be difficult to get somebody to actually close, and how many investors will wait for that one closure to occur before they'll actually come to the table. And Claire, maybe you can add a little bit in your experience about that.
Yeah, definitely. So, on our experience, especially with the market the way it is now, there is, even when investors have said yes and they want to commit, ICs will have different terms as to what that yes means. And let's say if you're raising 50 million of fundraising and your lead ticket's 20 million of that, they may well have a stipulation to say, well, that's fine, but we're not closing until you've got 35 million syndicated. So that's where you can sometimes get into this sort of chicken and egg scenario where you're really trying to pull together the whole syndicate. Mm-hmm. So it's not just one yes you need, it's often several yeses who are all committed to closing at the same time. And kind of getting that commitment for the first person to pull the trigger can sometimes be a little like herding cats, quite frankly. Yeah.
And that yes today is even different than yes was 2 years ago. I mean, yes today, you can't be surprised with the capital markets where they are and what's going on. And 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I didn't think that there was going to be an investor that would do anything different than traditional liquidation preferences or anything different with specific demands, because money was easy to get 2 or 3 years ago. If you just did your job. It's different now. So, yes, be careful what you sign up for. Yes, we want that money, but know that what you're getting into, and remember, it is just a term sheet. It doesn't mean it's final. And, that's what I would say on a yes, because if all of a sudden you start getting these terms that make no sense for the company and you believe in the company, you got to keep moving. And it's not always easy to look at a yes and actually walk away. But if yes can turn out to be really a dangerous process if you go on with the wrong partner that's truly looking out to just protect their money and not looking out to help the entrepreneur build their business.
So I think that's actually a really important point, particularly as you're maybe looking for the one that will sign, and as you're getting more desperate to actually find money, given that the market has shifted. Understanding what it is that you're willing to give on before you go out to the market, I think, is actually important. I mean, this is a principle that's true in contract negotiations, too. Like, what's your giving point? What are you willing to give up? Is it a board seat that you're willing to give? Where are your flexibilities? And then try to stick to that to the extent that you can. Obviously, depending on where you sit vis-a-vis bargaining position, that may, instruct your tolerance level or your risk level. But at the same time, at least predefining for yourself when you go out, okay, here's where we're willing to go. And I say that just because I've seen clients over time ultimately fold on things that were really important to them because they needed to actually get money in the bank. That's a super important thing. Obviously, you don't want to close the doors of the company. But having said that, you can have your company head in a totally different direction than you anticipated because you were willing to give in places that you didn't anticipate up front.
And diving a bit more into that, into the terms, I'm curious, do investors and entrepreneurs typically have the same terms that they're not willing to negotiate on, or do you find that they're different? Like, what are the most important things that you've seen as a lawyer from investors and the most important things from entrepreneurs? And then from you two, I'd be curious what the most important things you look for in a term sheet are. If we could start with that, Kyle, I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, the two different parties, and again, this is always going to be true in a contractual negotiation, you're looking out for your interests. So liquidation preferences are going to make a difference, how much power and control you have and you're willing to cede. Those are things that matter equally, but in many ways from an opposite perspective. And again, something we sort of spoke about yesterday is understanding that your partner that you're bringing to the table, do they have the same exact goals that you do and goals for the company? And that can get reflected in the term sheet, and it can also make a huge difference after the money's in the bank and what that partnership looks like moving forward.
Yeah, agreed. And, you know, some maybe often overlooked terms of things like major investor rights, level of reporting, and that sort of thing. And I think, you know, especially for early stage companies, really considering if you have a very minimal finance team and your investors want really detailed monthly reporting, you know, what impact is that going to have on your staffing and your resourcing and your ability to spend time focusing on the business and growing the business rather than just serving, you know, investor reporting, and investors have a lot of different needs. And the other thing, you know, we talked a bit about board membership. You know, often the lead investor will take a board seat. So really understanding what is that investor bringing to your board? You know, do they have the right strategic contracts or commercial experience? And one of the things I found is, you know, the board seat belongs to the firm or the company that's invested. So actually the individual who ends up on your board, you might find that you actually need to be very specific and say, no, it's not appropriate for you to send an associate along who's trying to get some experience, but actually we have a very small board and it's really important that those people can add the right level of value.
Right.
And then the other thing you can end up with is a lot of board observers, which is definitely something in my experience that can either really enhance a boardroom where they are the right people and really add a lot of depth and color to a conversation, but it can also, you know, mean that a board is much less effective because you're not as focused. And so yeah, all of these sort of smaller points are actually really important.
I think the board seat piece is particularly important, understanding and even having a conversation to make sure you're on the same page with that investor about who's going to actually occupy that seat. Is it going to be somebody who's seasoned, understands the business, understands the industry, and is actually in a position to move your business forward? Or are they using that seat as a testing ground for one of their younger partners? And I have a client right now currently that is experiencing that, where a very green individual is sitting on the board and is sort of bullying around the company with very little understanding of what it means to actually occupy that position, and it's causing a lot of chaos. And, you know, again, they own the seat so they can fill it, but at the same time, if you can at least have a mutual understanding of what attributes are required for that seat, that can go a long way, I think.
Right. And it's really, I would jump on the board piece too. It's, as a CEO, you're interviewing a venture capital or private equity firm just as much as they're interviewing you. And, you know, I've had both situations. One where you have lead investor who sends a really talented but not the lead investor to sit on your board. It's shut down every vote unless you presented everything to the true head of the firm 2 days before, because we'll get back to you. We're not putting our vote in for things that you had to vote on. The flip side is people that run, you know, I worked with a partner that she was the best I've ever worked with, in the sense that she was a former operator of a major med tech company. She knew exactly the position I was in. She knew exactly what we were doing. We set it up. We were really excited. And then when they were a lead investor of a round, and then the general practitioner of the whole firm, general partner, I should say, of the whole firm, decided he was going to be on the board. Brilliant, brilliant person, but didn't know the company. It wasn't the excitement that we had. And 3 years later, I don't know if he's ever stepped foot in the building of the company, and he does everything by Zoom, and really smart. I'm not beating anyone. I'm not at that company, and I'm not talking about who, so I'm not going there. But it wasn't the reason that you're so excited to work with the VC. It's really important because no one's interested. It doesn't help our resumes or our companies to hear that, well, I sit on 9 or 10 boards. That doesn't mean anything. I mean, that's, so that's 9 or 10 hours a month that you spend versus, on different companies, and I lose that. So we're excited to work with VCs, but we really need VCs that are real partners to the entrepreneur, and that's dangerous in a yes. You get a yes sometimes, and you don't get to choose. You have a question?
To that point, though, I think even understanding why you're getting a yes, what's the interest?
Yeah.
And I have a situation with a client currently where the investor, they're at a very unique inflection point where they're replacing the CEO, they're really at this, about to really launch and create something huge. And the initials at the company all want to grow the company and make it a very big deal. But the investor, as it turns out, wanted to come in, build to the point where they can sell. So now they're in this place of trying to replace the CEO, and there's two totally different visions for what this company is going to be and do. On the one hand, like I say, we want to build this miraculous thing, particularly the first CEO, right? Because the first CEO, this is typically their baby. They've grown it, they've built it. There's a lot of pride involved. And so they want to hand this off to somebody who can take their vision and explode it into something fantastic. Whereas the investor, on the other hand, is like, yeah, that's really great, good for you. We want to flip this and get a return on our investment and sell this thing as of tomorrow. And that really, really impacts the credentials of the CEO that's going to come in. And is there any way to solve for this perfectly? Probably not, but if in the initial conversations when they got that yes, they understood, hey, we're investing because we want to flip this company. That would have been an important thing to know. You might have walked away from that particular investor because that is not your vision. You want to build this thing into the multi-million-dollar corporation that's really successful, and for that particular CEO, they can go to bed at night and say, listen, I started something really, really big, and this is my dream. And so they're just totally diverting paths. And they're, again, at stalemate with who's the next CEO? What are the credentials of the next CEO? And some of that might have been able to be avoided if when they got the yes, they actually had a conversation. Why are you saying yes? What is your actual goal for this company?
Absolutely. After the yes, you should definitely understand what your investor wants, because the investor, they don't always want what's best for the company. Their job is to do what's best for their investment. And sometimes those aren't exactly the same thing in the eyes of the founders or the current CEO. We do have a question.
Yeah, so, what you guys are saying is really interesting. How much, as a new CEO, should I expect?
I think it's a good question, and I don't know if it's the accurate percentages. I was very happy and pleased that 100% of signed term sheets led to, because hopefully if you have a good enough relationship and do the work with the VC partner up front, like they don't just get signed in a few days, right? So these are the people that a new entrepreneur meets here. If you're looking to raise money this quarter, you should have met them a year ago at this meeting and build a relationship. And that's, so you have to have that time in. So hopefully the people you're talking to, you've built a relationship, they know you, they're watching the company, they're keeping an eye. And so I think 100% can be signed, but there's still time. And it's still, a pain in the butt oftentimes, because everyone has different, if you're in the second phase, you're in a B round or you're in an A prime round, your major investor writes, and everyone that was early says, I put all the risk in, this guy's coming in with all this money, they're not getting what I get. So, so there's, and they're all right. So, but I believe 100% should be, if the CEO is the kind that just wants to shop a term sheet, I actually think that's almost disrespectful. Also, I'm taking the venture side on that one, but it does happen. But, you hope if it's a good relationship, it should be 100%, my opinion.
Yeah, look, I'd say we've also been pretty lucky in the sense that 100% of our term sheets have turned into final investments. We have had some back and forth, not everything is negotiated at the term sheet stage, and there have been a little bit of trading just in one case, a little bit on economics, but normally that's the piece that is done at the term sheet stage and is pretty fixed. It can, though, I would say, in terms of timeline, take anything from, I'd say, a month or 6 weeks to a few months between signing that term sheet there with your lead investor and the final first close. And that's for sort of the reasons I mentioned before, in terms of syndication. It depends, how far along are you with those other conversations at the point at which the lead investor says yes. And the second thing is there is quite a lot of due diligence, as much as you want to get ahead of everything in the first stages, they will go and they will look at everything from every senior leader employment contract to, every contract that you have with all your underlying customers. So, as long as everything there is ready and you can, back up every single number you've shown your investors with the correct contracts and things, then you should be pretty confident. But you do need to be prepared and ready for that because investors will want to see it. And so, yeah, and it can take some time to go through that process.
And
I
a key
think
word there was, go ahead, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think ideally, if you have a good term sheet and it actually reflects what it should reflect, which are the key terms, then there shouldn't be a problem getting it over the finish line. I think where things can fall apart is if that term sheet doesn't actually express the important preferences of each of the parties. But having said that, they typically do. You should have good counsel. You should be open in your conversations. But where I think it can really fall apart is in diligence. If you're conducting diligence post-term sheet and the investor, for example, uncovers, for lack of a better way of putting it, some significant warts or there's something under the hood of the car that is really unsavory and wasn't disclosed up front in conversation, that can be really problematic. So that's where it's really on the company to disclose, hey, we do have a few concerns, or being also strategic about how you enter into those initial contracts. So entering into a whole host of really unfavorable contracts just to get out of the gates doesn't necessarily help you, because then when you get to that diligence and you have an investor that looks, under the hood of the car and it's like, wait, you agreed to that? You're giving up this amount in royalties? Well, what's the upside for us? So you do want to be a bit careful in the beginning that you're actually agreeing to, good contractual relationships so that you can leverage those, when you're talking to VCs and when they look under the hood of the car.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we can all in this room agree it feels like a big accomplishment when you get a term sheet. But a key thing is to make sure the correct amount of diligence was done, both on your side and the investor side. So after you get those term sheets, if more diligence is done, it's not going to change those terms. Because when that happens, it is always ugly when terms are changed from the term sheet to the final documents. Follow up?
Last question.
Yeah.
So what has really been ugly recently was the deal.
Yeah.
Even in the time that I was negotiating these, or our lawyer as a company was negotiating, the legal fees for the VC seemed to go from, we'll cover up to 50,000, it turned out to 100,000 to, but then I expected those extra fees, to be part of it. But then I also realized that some part of me said, why would they charge us if they're trying to help us? But then I said, they're the ones giving me the money. They're just paying back themselves. So make sure I'm asking for the right amount up front. So if you ask for the right amount up front, knowing that you should probably put another, not 1%, if you're talking millions, put numbers in there that you're going to pay them back, and don't fret over it. It doesn't. If they ask for it, great. You're paying yourself back, and it's good. So I don't have a percentage, but I don't know. You might know more percentages, but it really fluctuated from. I've seen everything from 50 to 125,000 of legal fees to just close the deal.
Yeah, that sounds fair. I mean, look, it also depends on the market, right? So when money was easy, legal fees were not as extensive in large part because people were screaming through diligence. We don't really care. Like, money's easy. We're going to go. We're going to sign everything and move forward. Valuations of companies were through the roof. Everybody was super happy. And as the market shifts and people are being more careful and conscientious, there's going to be increased diligence, which just ultimately means increased legal fees.
Yep.
Having said that, there are ways, I think, that you can manage counsel. And I will say that having a point person for diligence, making sure that you have culled the appropriate document sets and they're set up and organized in the data room in a logical way so that their counsel can come in and do an efficient review of your documents. And that avoids, for example, their side calling random people in the company, oh, we have a question about X, Y, and Z. I want to talk to your quality person. I want to talk to your CFO. I want to talk to... Set up your team that's going to be available during diligence to actually be responsive to requests. Make sure you have, like I say, the documents culled and in the data room in a very logical way. These are things that you can do to help create efficiencies in that process, because sitting on the attorney side, when all of this is sort of gummed up, it's up to the attorneys then to try and unscramble it and sit on the line with opposing counsel to say, what do you expect to see? What do you want to see? Oh, this was there, this was there. And then explaining, oh, when you talk to that random person in the company and they said X, Y, and Z, actually, they weren't operating with full information. You need to talk to this other person. And it's ultimately the attorneys that are quarterbacking that at whatever rate they're quarterbacking that at, $500 an hour if it's going to be a young associate, up to, $2,000 an hour if it just ends up being, a senior partner. So there's ways you can manage costs by just being thoughtful at the outset.
This is going to be a bold statement, but I actually believe that you can reduce your legal fees by 50% by just managing the process and owning and being the center of communication and not giving that job to them.
Agreed.
I mean, I'll always have a conversation. First thing, what do you expect this to cost and legal costs for closing? And I mean, it's not particularly nice, but you have to look at your legal bills and see if you're paying for the training of a much younger associate. But by the way, we've closed 2 or 3 deals in the past year, and legal fees have, on all of those deals, been over $150,000 in an early stage. So I would expect that right now in the U.S. for closing deals. I can't speak for international.
One thing I would say for earlier round investors is, legal fees are probably not the area to skimp on when it comes to these documentation. It's so important that you have the right counsel in your corner when those documents are drafted. Your Series A documents are going to be the basis for your Series B documents, and then your C documents, and then your D documents. New investors tend to come in and start from the documents that are already in place, and yes, make changes and if necessary to those. But, you can also hold up the process, going back to that original question, if there are strange rights that look fine because it's a Series A and you've got one big investor in there, but, certain blocking rights and different rights for sort of that original first investor can be very problematic when you're getting into Series B and Series C, if those rights haven't fallen away, for example, or they maintain them, because it's something that other investors will come in that final diligence process, and it may just be uncomfortable, and then you might have to start retrading with that first investor. So actually getting it right at the very beginning will save you so much time when you get further down the line, is what I'd say.
Because when you're closing that deal, that first round, you're not only closing that round, but you are setting the terms, or at least the starting point of terms for all of your future rounds. And on that, so in these terms, a lot of it comes down to control that can cause issues later on. What have you all seen as points that have held up deals once you get into your final closing documents that have been real contention points that are not typically negotiated in the term sheet?
Major investor rights, and based on each round. So, as your first round, it doesn't matter because it's your first round. But then your first round investors, rightfully so, are taking a bigger risk. And you get bigger investors coming in to lead additional rounds, which is great, but then they want, certain major investor rights. And then all of a sudden the percentage of money that's in from some of your early investors doesn't come anywhere near the money. It's just a, that seems to be the one sticking point always. And then the board seats, because again, if you have an early investor that even led your first round and they're on your board, but they don't put anything in for your next 1 or 2 or 3 rounds, I'm not taking them off the board, but all of a sudden you have a new investor coming in with a big boatload of money in your B or C, and they're saying, we have this seat and maybe 2 seats, and we only want a board of up to this many. Someone's going off the board, and they know it, but so that's usually those are the 2 to me that I've seen.
I'd say very similar experience in that sense. Also, I think where you might have, especially in the early days, I think it's quite common for a strategic to lead early rounds rather than financial investors quite often. And sometimes they come with their own unique terms, especially when they are combined with some sort of commercial arrangement. They can cause difficulties, especially if, there are, let's say, even if it's a perceived block, I would say often it's not really a block, but a perceived block on working with other companies in the same space or, some sort of conflict. That can sometimes create issues down the line as well, I think.
I would say just one thing with the board, and for any even earlier stage entrepreneurs, if you can get an operator on the board in addition to your venture partners,
Absolutely.
do it early, because you're going to just run out of space, and then and no disrespect, it's venture partners, they have to protect their money. That really is their job. They want to protect the company, the best ones, and demonstrate that and are great helps. But if you don't have a real partner on your board, it's really difficult to just run a business without any other operators that are independent directors. So I would do that early, no matter how early stage you are.
Absolutely. So we only have a couple minutes. Are there any questions there?
Well, shopping, and you can still put dates to different groups. If you really have multiple people that want to submit a term sheet, you basically said, hey, we're accepting. It's almost like selling a house right now. It's like you're going to do 3 days of open houses, and we're going to accept our offers on Tuesday after the Sunday. It's a buyer's market. Assuming it's a seller's market. But in the same thing, if you really know that, you set the expectations that we're accepting term sheets by this date, and this way, if you think you're getting multiple, I just feel this is my personal opinion. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just, if I got a term sheet from someone that I've been working with the last month, and they've always said that we will only do this if we lead, I feel it's disrespectful for me personally to shop it. I'm sure many people say you're crazy, Todd, because you could do so much better if you do shop. I just don't.
Depends what you're shopping for, too. I mean,
Right.
Valuation and liquidation profits, all these things, they're important, but I actually really do believe it's much more important that you're shopping for the best investor and partner in this company, because all those things don't matter when shit hits the fan, and it always does. It matters that you have good partners at that stage. Sorry, and term sheet shopping? No.
I mean, I'd probably agree to it. I do think that, small horse trading on valuation, for example, or what have you, is, yes, it will help you in the short term, but actually in the longer term, what's more important is knowing that lead investor and maybe the 1 or 2 larger investors around are there for you in the long haul, will be a good partner. Actually, that was the question, is who are you getting into bed with? Is this a one-off ticket? They might give you a massive ticket, but it's a one-off, and they're not offering you any strategic value over and above that, where you might be better off going with someone who is slightly more conservative on the valuation, but actually is going to put money in every single round for the next however many rounds, which when you're trying to syndicate will be incredibly valuable when you get there, and will support you.
That's a huge, huge point to know what kind of dry powder, because look at this market. If I'm a VC, I'm protecting my portfolio companies first. You have to.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to know that they can continue that. It's a great point.
I think if anything, and this is reflected in the legal fees or shopping term sheets or anything else, it's, when you're thinking about money, of course you want to be conservative, and of course you want to be thoughtful. But I guess my best advice is don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Make sure that you're actually, as you say, getting into bed with the right partner, somebody who shares your vision that you can imagine working with in the long term. And that sometimes is worth letting go a few things here and there and saying, did I get economically the absolute best deal I could have possibly gotten? I mean, maybe not, but on the reverse side, maybe you also got the best partner that shares your strategic vision, and that, in the long run, is worth everything.
So this sign is yelling at me that we're 46 seconds over, so we're going to wrap. Thank you all. This was super, super helpful, a lot of great information. I hope this was beneficial for everybody. And yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining the panel.
Thank you.